Hi there. So I thought I would get around to looking at vertex animation textures. Now, if you're not familiar with the technique, it's basically a way of animating a static mesh using a texture and a shader, or a material. Now, the texture stores position offsets, and then the shader interpolates between those various frames to create this animation. Now, what's great about it is, it operates on a static mesh and uses a texture. So you don't get a lot of the weight of doing skinned meshes or bone animations. And because it's a texture, it kind of sits on the GPU, so it's fairly performant. So this is a great video that breaks down the overall process. They happen to use 3ds Max, though, which I don't have installed. But they do use Unreal Engine later on. So this is a good video. I'll post a link in the description. Another link I will post of a great breakdown of the overall flow of vertex animation textures is this video. But towards the end, they use Godot. Obviously, I don't use Godot, so I kind of want to use Blender for this example. So on the hunt for that, let me see. I ran across this forum post on a vertex animation script for Blender. Hooray. So the original script is a 3ds Max script created by Epic, and it's quite old. So what this person has done, Josh Bogart, thank you very much, he's ported the script to Blender and Python. And you can grab the script here on the GitHub, so you can just go and download the zip file onto your desktop and extract it. The actual Python code is only a couple hundred lines or so long, so not very much code. I haven't dug into it, so but it doesn't look to be that complex. So it's something I'm going to do in the future. So back to it. If you haven't used Blender, in this example, I'm going to use Blender 2.83, I think. Yes, I also have 2.9 installed, but haven't tested it. So this is just basically a brand new scene. And if you haven't used Blender before, that's okay. I'll walk you through it. I'm fairly new to Blender as well. Pretty noob at it myself. But I really enjoy it. I don't know what it is about Blender 2.8 and above. It just kind of starts clicking with me. Much more than Houdini and Maya. And plus, you've got all the stupid licensing and payment options around those programs. Blender seems to be able to do everything, which is quite nice. So to install something, you go to Edit Preferences, and if you want to install an add-on, you simply click Install, navigate to the particular Python file you want, or you can just point it to a zip as well. Once you do that, you'll have to enable it here. There are categories for this stuff. So here, a category for Unreal Tools. So I've installed both of the Python scripts there. And while I'm at it here, I've also installed under Pipeline the Send to Unreal plugin as well. So if you're not familiar with that, basically Epic has released a Blender add-on for exporting FBX static meshes and rigs to Blender, and they've also created a series of videos on the subject as well, and they've got a GitHub for the actual add-on that you can install. So that's what I have installed inside of Blender here. And underneath it here, under the import options, I've just got Launch FBX Import UI checked because I want to adjust some of the settings when the mesh is imported into Unreal Engine. So with that, we're not going to animate anything terribly complex. I just have a cube here. So this is the camera, get rid of that, and the light. So all I have is a cube, and I want to animate it. So down here, there's the timeline, and we're currently on the first keyframe. So I will hit I and set the location of this. And then I will go to frame 30. Now the units or frames per second, I think is in, God, I don't even know. here, frame rate, 30 frames per second. So that's under this output properties here. So if I go to frame 30 now, and let's just, I'll hit G on the keyboard and then Y to move it along the Y-axis here. So I'll just stick it somewhere over there, and then hit I on the keyboard and keyframe the location here, and you can see we've got an animation. Okay, so now with this particular mesh selected, doesn't really matter where in the timeline it is. If you hit N on the keyboard or click this little tiny arrow on the side here, that brings up this sidebar of the various plugins. Here you can see I've got Unreal Tools, and if you don't see this drop down, it's probably because you have it collapsed here. So you can choose the frame start 1, the frame end would be 30, and then you want to process the animation meshes. And immediately I get an error about the scene unit must be metric with 0.01. Okay. So what I can do here is let's just create a new scene. Sorry about that. And we need to go and adjust our output scale. So under this is scene properties. Under units, I can set 0.01, and now we've got, you know, something really tiny. And so I can actually scale up the, let's make it 100 units tall. And now you can see I've got some clipping issues. The clipping issues are, I think, under view here. You can go and set the clip end. I'll set it to 100 meters as well. Okay, so now we can go and animate it. So again, simply I insert, try selecting the object first, go to frame 30, GY, position it over there, I location, and we have our animation now. So now when we go and export it, won't complain. There we go. So what you can see here is it created something called an export mesh. And this export mesh, if we want to export it to Unreal Engine, we actually have to drag and drop it into the mesh category, because when I use the pipeline export send to Unreal, it'll only look for stuff that is under this mesh collection here. Now, in addition to that, it's also created a couple of textures. So under UV editing, you can see here the unwrapped UV for this. Under this drop down here, we've got a normal texture and a offset. Now the offset looks completely black because we didn't actually go very far in distance, I think. So that's the reason for that. So for the offsets here, again, you click this little sidebar. We can save this. I'm going to save this to my desktop, and I will call it offsets.exr. And we're going to use RGBA, and the color depth is going to be 16 bits per channel here, color. And we're going to save it as an open EXR. Save that. And we'll do the same for the normals, although this time we are going to just save it as a bump RGB, and we'll call it normals.bmp. So those are the exported textures, and you can see here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 colors. I think those are for the 8 vertices. These are the normals, and these would be the position offsets. So with those two textures, all we need is the actual mesh here. Now, if you open an Unreal Engine project, we actually have to set this up first. So if you do a search for Python, and make sure you have the built-in selected, we need to enable the editor script plugin. Yes, and we will also want to make sure we have, I think, editor scripting utilities. So I'll restart that. And I'm using 425. Although 426 should be out any minute now. And the last thing is just go to the project settings, do a search for Python. And you need to enable remote execution. So it basically opens a little port here. So Blender can communicate with Unreal Engine. So with those two things set up, now if we go to Blender and I will export, click Send to Unreal. And if I go back to Unreal Engine, you can see the pop-up is here. I'll just reset it to the default. Now for the mesh is what we're importing. You want to uncheck auto generate collision. I think remove generates, don't generate light map UVs. Combine meshes checked, and although there's only one mesh, so it doesn't really matter. And that, don't create a material, and don't import textures. Now, if you're wondering how I got all of these settings, under here is the documentation. Again, link in the description. It walks you through the export process and import process and tells you basically for the textures what you need to enable. We'll do that shortly. And what you need to check for the import options on the mesh. So it's all there if you need to double check it, or perhaps I missed something. So I will import that. Hopefully I got everything. Now the Blender add-on sticks it under this Untitled category, Untitled asset. And here we have our awesome cube. Now once you have this cube here, you need to actually set up a couple of more things on the if you do a search for precision, you need to use full precision UVs, and I think, yeah, that's fine. And there was the distance field, resolution scale should be 0. Apply those changes, and you can save and close that. Now let's import our textures here. Let me just minimize everything and grab them. So I got the normals and the offsets. So the offset I will bring in, and the normal. Now for these normals, we need to make sure it's got HDR compression, which is great. sRGB is off. What else? Filtering should be nearest. And you never want to stream this for a runtime virtual texture. And I'm missing something. I know, I can feel it. Oh, MIPGen, no MIP maps as well. That should be good for that. If we miss something, we'll double check it. We should probably write a editor utility script to apply all of these changes in the future, because it can be really easy to miss something. So for the normals, we want vector displacement, sRGB off. We'll check the no MIP maps, good. Filter is nearest as well, and never stream should be checked. Yes, it is. Okay, save that. Finally, we need to create a material. I'll call mine new material. And then we can simply drag these in there. And we need to convert these to texture objects. And if I do a search for vertex animation, we've got a node for that. Okay. And let me just set the, with the static mesh selected, I'm going to click the teapot so we have it in the viewport. And then we can start wiring stuff up here. So I'm just going to hook up a color, get a dark blue. The vertex normal here, plug it into the normal, the world position offset, and we need a couple of custom UVs. So with the material selected, Go to custom UVs, need 4. And wire those into 2 and 3. And these texture objects, this one goes into the this one goes into the texture, and this one goes into the normal. And then as you can see there, it's already starting to move. And why is it so chunky? I'm not sure. And the number of morph targets, I think this is the number of frames. Don't quote me on that. And we could also create a time variable and multiply it by something. And plug this into the animation. And if I wanted to slow this down, we can do it at like half speed. And there we go. We've got a texture animating this static mesh. That's not the world's greatest animation. Now, my ulterior motive for teaching you this is I'm having a problem here with the normals. As you can see, let me actually set this to 0 and kind of zoom in on it. And you can see there's like this weird normal issue happening here. So I'm not sure if I exported the normals incorrectly or what I'm doing. So on that front, if you can figure this out and let me know, that would be fantastic. And I've also made a post on this. If you scroll down to page, on the last page, I've basically got the screenshot of the issue here with this yellow color, and you can see the kind of weirdness that is going on. So if you happen to know how to fix the normals, that would be great, but at minimum here, it looks like you can animate some vertex positions. Now, in Blender, if you want to actually dig into the object and start like animating individual vertices, you'll want to go to Preferences, and there's a add-on called Anim All. So enable that, and once you have that enabled, then again, it's in the sidebar here, and it's hard to see it unless you expand it, but you can start animating or setting keyframes for points or bevels or UVs, any of that stuff. And I'll post another link to a tutorial in the description for that. Anyway, that's it for now. If you got a solution to the normals problem, let me know. I'd definitely be curious to see the solution. I'll talk to you guys later. Cheers.